All right. So super excited to have an amazing mentor of mine. Um, I learned so much about teaching and still do from her. She also happens to be my mom, but Julie McFarland. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background and education and, kind of your qualifications?
All right. So I have been in the education field for 29 years. I started in kindergarten. I've taught second grade. Then after that, I taught at the University of Utah. I taught the early childhood program up there, and I taught the reading courses for students that are going to be teachers. Then I also worked at Salt Lake Community College, and I taught the early childhood courses there also. Then after that, I had the opportunity to become a principal at a small private school and worked there for 7 years to do that. We were from grades 2.5-year-olds to third grade. Then after that point, I went back into public education and taught third grade for 7 years, and then finished my career back into kindergarten. So did a full circle there. So I've worn a lot of different hats and have had a lot of experiences within the education department and the education field.
Yeah, and I think that that's been very evident. I know you got Teacher of the Year one year for the district, and I know how much all of the parents and teachers and students loved you. I was at your, retirement since you just retired this year, and I was at your retirement party, and you were beloved by everybody, and everybody told me how much they loved you. So that's it says a lot about your teaching career and your experience. So
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. That means a lot to me.
so yeah, I am super excited to be able to just kind of chat with you about kind of everything and anything like we have many a time before.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the fun things is that we're doing this over Zoom because as part of your retirement, you're traveling. So where are you right now?
So we are in Fort Davis, Texas, headed to Big Bend National Park in Texas. So we are in the southwest part of Texas. Texas, of course, is very big. So we're trying to experience as much as we can as we're traveling. So I'm sitting in a very small, looks like probably early 1900s, this building was built, library, to do the Zoom call with you.
And I'm so glad that you're able to do that with me. And it's a perfect example of how technology has been able to flatten our world and make it so, we can communicate. And I can still call you up and ask you to look over my blog posts before I
Right.
send them out and everything. And, even with you traveling and how awesome that is. So that's been really cool and is a great, I love hearing about all of your adventures. So let's talk a little bit about so you started out in kindergarten 29-ish years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You ended in kindergarten. So let's talk a little bit about kind of what you saw change in the kindergarten field.
And as far as with technology, it's a huge change. Just a little bit of background, 29 years ago, I taught at a school that didn't have, well, nobody had computers back then actually in the classrooms. I didn't even get a computer until about the third year teaching into the program. So many of the teachers didn't have computers back then. And it was also the culture there was not as affluent as where I ended. So this is really interesting to do the comparison between the two. When 29 years ago, anything we wanted to teach in the classroom, we had to do the research on our own. And that was research going to a library, that was going to classes. Back then, we went to quite a few classes of considered teachers that were expert teachers that traveled around the United States. And we would go to those classes and we would get the information of what they would do. We'd take pictures with our camera and then have to develop pictures so we could remember what they did. And kindergarten back then too wasn't a big push. And still in Utah, it's not a big push, but back then it was very little. And the core curriculum was really not even a curriculum. We didn't have curriculum for kindergarten. It was more getting them used to being in school. So back then, the technology, we didn't have it. They did not have computer programs. They didn't have computer classes. They didn't have computers. They didn't have iPads. We didn't have iPhones. So that tells you a big difference between that and what we currently are at. When I taught at where I ended my career, every single one of my students had iPads and access to computers, and they had computer courses, and we had a computer technology core that we had to teach, even starting in kindergarten. And I think there's a lot of pros and cons to computers and that in a program and in the schools.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more, like we were talking the other day about when you first started out, so your resources that you would use. So you had to make them yourself or go and buy them at an actual physical store. And now we have, Teachers Pay Teachers. We have all of the blogs, so many different resources that we can access at the click of a button instantly.
Yeah. And, that's a beauty of what we have, the technology. That's definitely one of the pros, especially for teachers. Back then, it was difficult. I mean, you didn't know really what the core program was. And me being in kindergarten, we really didn't follow a core. And so not even knowing what the core was or what you were supposed to teach, you really relied on other teachers. We had a saying back then, you're only as good as the teacher next door, which is true because you got all of your information from the teacher next door or teachers that you went and watched or classes you went to that were teachers. For an example, you didn't have email. We had no way of communicating with parents other than letters. So we had to type on a typewriter, or if you were one of the fortunate ones that had a computer with a printer, you'd never had printers in your room. You always had to go to a different place to print. If you had that, you created them. And I bought books from a place called it's called Utah Idaho Supply. We had that store that we'd have to go to, and I bought clip art books. So we'd buy the clip art books, we'd have to go and make copies of them and then cut it out and then glue it onto the notes that we wanted to send home to even make it decorative. So it had to be all done on a typewriter. And then we'd put that little decoration on and we had to send home the notes. But that's the only way we could communicate with parents other than talking to them if they came and picked up their child. And so things have definitely changed as far as that goes. As far as what I wanted to teach something about bears. I went to Utah, Idaho and picked up a book that would have the worksheets already in it and activities in it, the songs in it, finger plays. I mean, because the knowledge base, when you first go into teaching is you have a lot to learn. Well, in kindergarten, there was a lot of songs and things like that. You just didn't know. So you would have to go and purchase a song book, or you would go and purchase a book about bears or penguins or whatever it was you wanted to teach. And hopefully it would be a good enough book that you could just make copies of it all and use that in the classroom. Interesting enough, Teachers Pay Teachers, I didn't even really learn about until I went back into third grade. And that's been probably, I'd say 10, 11, 12 years. So I don't know how long Teachers Pay Teachers was available, but that resource or the blogs that you guys do, the access that teachers have nowadays is unbelievable. And I think that's what makes a lot of teachers quality teachers too. It gives you that access so you're not recreating everything that needs to be done, especially when you don't have a curriculum.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know I love it, like just talking to other teachers or going on the blogs and stuff. So it's more than just the teachers in our classrooms, because we've all unfortunately experienced teachers that are not best. That's
Right.
I can only imagine how hard that was back in the day when you were just your next door. That teacher was maybe not the best.
Right. And I've learned too, over when I was there and throughout my education and I finished my master's degree at that point and everything too. I wasn't the best teacher the first couple of years of teaching kindergarten. We did a lot of cutting and pasting and it was more crafts. And then throughout that education, you learn better ways and better techniques of teaching, and you become a better teacher, and so that saying is you're only as good as the teacher was next door was very, very true back then, because I relied on my teachers that had been teaching for years, that had been there. Those were the ones that I had to rely on, because you walk into a classroom, especially no curriculum, no computer, you have no resources. And so I walk into the first day and I'm like, what am I supposed to even teach these kids? You have to depend upon the person next door and your colleagues, which, is also one of the cons of computers, is a lot of times teachers don't seek that access or don't use the experienced teachers as much as maybe they could, because they have it all at their fingertips.
Yeah. So it might detract from like the building community.
Absolutely. I think that's a big thing. Yeah, it could definitely do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Well, let's kind of talk about, you were saying how you guys did a lot of like cutting and pasting work when you first started out. And now, your kindergartners have iPads. So let's talk about kind of some of the pros and cons of having technology in the classroom for our students specifically. And, especially at that kindergarten level, that's a young age, and there's always controversy over screen time and all of that stuff. So kind of what was your experience and what did you see?
And that's a great thing. And I actually, with my experience, because I've been around the block a few times, 29 years of doing this, and I've seen the progression of all of this. There is a place for the computers, I believe, in education. Absolutely. 100% agree. We have to teach that. That is our world now. It has to be taught. Now, there's a lot of things when we're talking different grade levels, there's a lot of differences I think we need to be aware of. So with our kindergartners coming in, you need to think about, they have so much access to the world. As you said, it flattened the world on their fingertips right here, available to them. They come with such a great knowledge base. I mean, these kids my kindergartners knew things about bats that I didn't know. I mean, their knowledge is just incredible. But yet, and that is phenomenal. That makes teaching easier. It makes it a lot more fun. I believe computers for teachers versus students, I think there's a difference there too. So let's talk about computers for teachers. So for me, going into kindergarten, I didn't have to know all the songs by memory, or I didn't have to know all the finger plays, or I could come up with cute little Sesame Street clips or different clips to enhance my teaching and make it more fun and exciting for the students, because that's what they want now. They have the computer, they have the TV, they have all of the games. We're competing with that as teachers. So we need to be as entertaining also, just to keep the attention of them. And so that was extremely beneficial for me to be able to go and get those resources, make fun slideshows and things. And then
sorry, I'm going to interject really quick. I like that you said enhance our teaching.
Absolutely. That's where I was going to head next, because it has to be as an enhancement, not a replacement. And unfortunately, I've seen that where in upper grades, the computer becomes the teacher, and the teacher is back doing whatever they are choosing to do. And they'll make like slideshows, or they'll make whatever platform they're using, they're going to make that their teaching, and they just regurgitate that every single year. And they will use that as a substitute teacher where they're not actually physically up teaching. And we need to be very, very careful of that, because we're losing a lot of that interaction. There's a reason we still have teachers and we're not all on computers. And I think during COVID, we saw that. We saw that interaction. We saw how our students suffered without that. And if we're in a classroom and we're replacing teachers with a computer program, whatever, even if it's teacher made, we're doing a disservice to our students at that point. They need to have that interaction. They need to have that ability to be able to do that. Now, I'm not saying they don't need to know computers, because they definitely do, but that should be used as a enhancement feature. It should be used as a reinforcement, not the teaching component. That's where, and I also don't think we should be teaching the same thing year after year after year and using the same stuff. Each year, as any educator knows, our students come to us very different. Some years they'll come higher, lower, middle, maybe they need more social skills. In kindergarten, every year, those students needed a different twist on things. If I'm just regurgitating year to year to year, I'm doing a disservice to those kids and I'm not meeting their needs. And that's where we need to always go back to is, are we meeting the needs of our students on how they come into us? In kindergarten, that's a whole different beast. We get these kids, like I said, with a huge knowledge base. They are a lot of them, like I said, end of my career is a very affluent area. So they came, a lot of them ready to read. Now, I did have a few that had never been on computers, which we're going to talk about a little bit, maybe just the difference between students who come with computer knowledge versus no computer knowledge. But this students, they knew how to use computers. They knew a lot of the letters. They had sounds. In Utah, we have a program for preschoolers that is called an Upstart program. That's a phenomenal program. I loved that program because the students became very prepared for kindergarten. But what I did see, and this was an interesting outcome of this, which is one I didn't expect, because I was actually going to go work with Upstart. They actually wanted me to come and help do their programs. And something I didn't even think about until I was actually physically in the classroom and watching these students, they didn't have the fine motor skills. So they didn't know how to cut. They didn't know how to color. They didn't know how to hold a pencil. They didn't know how to hold a paintbrush, because a lot of times the parents were so focused on the computer ABCs that something that you can measure knowledge, I guess is how I can say that, versus the other piece of that of holding a pencil, being able to write, being able to color, being able to cut. I had students that would come and hold their scissors upside down. They've never held scissors before. I had students never held a pencil before. So they never colored before. They never glued before. So that was quite a process that was really interesting to me, that I had to focus on so much of that. And I mean, you still focused on ABCs, right? But there was more of that I realized I had to focus on that they didn't come with because of that. And the other thing is we cannot overlook is the social interactions. We have students nowadays, they come to us so different than they did 29 years ago. We have kids who don't know how to play with one another. We have kids that really have not been spoken to very much. So communicating with one another, how to communicate feelings and emotions. There was a lot of issues with that too. There is a place.
I bet especially the last couple of years with after COVID, where there weren't a lot of interactions other than with parents and other, siblings and family members, probably.
Yes. And that's if they were fortunate enough to have that interaction. And we did see a major difference. I think COVID really opened teachers' eyes and maybe parents' eyes and administration and education as a whole as a field. It opened our eyes a little bit to what we need and what those kids receive from us. When I've had in Utah, we still had half-day programs, or we did not have programs kindergarten that were full days yet. We had a few of them that parents could opt into, but the majority of them were still half-day programs. And when I've got those students for 2.5 hours, putting them on a computer for a half an hour, no way. That just didn't make any sense to me. That's not what they needed, right? We're going back to meeting the needs of the students. Meeting the needs of the students, they needed the social interaction. If I'm walking into a kindergarten program that's quiet, there's something wrong there. They need to be communicating. That's how 5-year-olds learn. We know that through brain development. They learn through audible. They learn by talking. They have to communicate. That's how they learn. And if we're shutting that down by putting them on a computer and putting headphones on them, that's a struggle. That's something that could be done at home. Those are things that should be done other places, or in a full day program. It makes more sense to me that you would have that as a reinforcement, but you still have to have that interaction with kids.
Yeah. Well, and it's so hard because that kind of leads us into the equity part, where like if they don't have computers at home, and I was talking with Chandra, and we were talking about the different areas that you need to meet in order for technology to be equitable. And so it was like the physical, do they have access to computers? Do they have access to the internet? And then it was also like, do they have the technology skills? So, you know,
Mhm.
have they been exposed to it? Are they able to navigate on it? Do they have it where they, you know, can, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a sec. Do they have it used, like what is the usage? Are they using it
Mhm.
to do number facts, which is great, but it's not helping them think critically? Are they using it to just get the ABCs, but not really understanding deeper what that means? And then
Right.
do they understand kind of the why, and like do they have that initiative of why is this important to me? Like why should
Mhm.
I get online to do my schoolwork? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
making sure all of those components are met. And so, you know, for kindergarten, I can definitely agree, especially with the half day program, that maybe iPads are not the place. Like that's
Mhm.
not that, but it's hard too because, you know, there's going to be those kids that will for sure be on the iPads for hours later at home. And then you have ones that don't have any access. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And the equity piece is, I think, really big. And once again, we experienced that during COVID. Parents that don't have computers or don't have computer knowledge or internet knowledge, that basis. And I think there's a place definitely in the schools. We have to have it. Even in kindergarten, we have to have some type of, we had a curriculum for teaching kids proper etiquette on a computer and being safe, right? We have to have that because as parents, they may not be aware of a lot of the things that their kids are doing on the computer and that access. And COVID brought to a light a lot of that stuff. you know it's interesting too that some of these kids, the other thing is that to bring up about this is critical thinking skills. You hit on that. A lot of times I'm finding kids that have been exposed to computers as much as they had, which was in kindergarten in the area I was in. A lot of critical thinking skills weren't there. And if you don't have a parent who's very conscious of what is it they're doing on the computer, for me and with you kids, I picked games that encouraged a lot of that critical thinking skills or solving problems and thinking out of the box.
doing
We had
puzzles.
kids doing puzzles. Yes. I had kids that have never even seen a puzzle. And once again, in a fluent area, that's crazy to me. But they didn't have the critical thinking. They couldn't think out of the box. They didn't know how to solve problems. And that's another thing that we need to address is, yes, there is definitely a place for computers, definitely in the programs. They need to be there. But we need to keep in mind, what are we giving up by having that too? And, in third grade, so if we address this in third grade, when I taught third grade, my computers, I was very, very fortunate. I had a principal who I wrote a grant and we got a one-to-one. Now, I was the only class in that school that had a one-to-one. So every student had a computer. Every student had their own computer in my classroom. So it was beautiful because with third grade, they all were very, very proficient at keyboarding. So then when the SAGE testing rolled out and we needed to do the year-end testing, they had to do it on the computers, typing a paper. Well, my kids who had been exposed to the computer every single day and at keyboard every single day in my classroom versus the classrooms who only got it twice a week, it was a very big difference. My kids were able to complete the test online. They were able to complete the papers without much thought because they were proficient in keyboarding. If you're not trying to think about how do I type, and you could think about the process of writing your paper, they do better. And so that was an interesting little thing we did there that had brought out some experience about with the kids having that experience, just how much better they were at it.
Yeah. And a lot of, I've been reading a lot of articles with this course that I'm taking, and a lot of what we're talking about is kind of the shift that we need to have in kind of the role of teachers and how we use technology. And so we need to make sure that we're using, like, our roles as teachers is less about the facts. Like you said, these kids have facts at the tip of their fingers. So there's a
Yep.
few things that we need to make sure they know as far as like facts, but it's not the same as when I was in school or when you were in school, where school was where we learned all this stuff, like
Right.
that and reading books. So,
Mhm.
but so we need to move away from focusing kind of on that and focusing more on teaching them how to critically think about information, how to find it, kind of how to navigate flow, and how to be, I read a quote, I cannot remember the name of that article that it was from though, about how we need to teach, like we need to learn how to be learners, both
Mhm.
as teachers and as we need to teach our students that, because you can just passively get something, but if you don't know how the process works, especially now, by the time that we kind of learn a new process, learn a new technology, it's going to be obsolete by the time we get, especially in the school district, by the time we get actual like curriculum for it, it's going to be obsolete.
Right. Right.
Make sure that we're not focusing too much on that, but moving kind of towards, teaching them how to find it themselves.
Yeah. And I think too, that's been a big shift with teaching. Like I said, when I did it 29 years ago, I taught every single fact about whatever we were focusing on. Bears, we did a bear unit. I taught all the facts. I don't need to teach all that facts anymore because they have that at their fingertips. And I think part of what we need to teach is how to access that and good citizenship on the computer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going back to that, how to be on the computer and that good citizenship. But I also feel that, computers are so important, but you also need to be in tune to what the kids' needs are. And that's going back to what is it, the needs of the child. And that's where we need to keep our focus too. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in the curriculum or what we need to do that we lose focus over what the kids need.
Yeah, yeah. And I know, I've experienced with our district and everything, they would sometimes get so excited by the latest cool new thing that they didn't always remember how that would be implemented in the classroom.
Right, right. Yeah.
And it made it really kind of difficult as teachers because we're trying to, implement their new cool technology, but they're not giving us a lot to work with, if that makes
Right. Well, and also you have a learning curve within teachers, right? So for an example, you and I, let's just compare you and I, and when COVID hit, the district rolled out this program that we had to use Canvas. I had never been on Canvas. I'd never used Canvas. I'd never seen it before. And within one day, I'm supposed to be able to figure out Canvas and teach on Canvas. And that was a huge learning curve for me, where maybe for you, it might not have been as much because you've seen it in college, you've used it before, you may have used it in some of your courses, but it was a major, major, major learning curve for me to go through. And I had to be and figure out how to teach kindergartners on Canvas. And because that's what the district, really wanted that platform to be. And I think too, I had fellow teachers that had been teaching longer than I had who had to figure out how to do emails and how to figure out to do, taking roll on the computer, just even basic computer things. Matter of fact, when I joined back into the district, after I was a principal for a while, I went back into the district and they had me a MacBook. I'd never used a MacBook. I'd always done PCs. I'd never done. So that was a curve. And then they offered classes that were very basic classes, how to send an email, how to get onto the internet, how to take roll. I mean, because we had teachers, that are not computer proficient, don't use it on a day-to-day basis. And then we all of a sudden say, yeah, we're going to be on a computer. And by the way, everything's on the computer. So, even just within teachers, there's that discrepancy.
Yeah. Well, that I know I will out myself. I know I have rolled my eyes in some staff meetings where we're learning about, our latest rollout, our new technology. And then, I'm held in the meeting longer because someone is asking how to like open a file. And I roll my eyes because I'm like, my goodness, how do we not know that? But at the same time, like I can only imagine how hard it would be if you're not constantly using that. Like even our students, half the
Yeah.
time kids know how to use the stuff better than me. I know as a sub right now, I walk into a classroom and if, a lot of times it's like, it's not lined up just right. And the normal classroom teacher knows exactly how it lines to turn on the projector, all those fun things.
Right. Mhm.
But the kids will be like, oh, here, let me do it for you.
Yeah. 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 Well, back 29 years ago, when I started teaching in my student teaching, we were using the old Rizzo machines where you hand cranked to make copies. So you talk about, I went from that to this laptop sitting in my hand to this little computer here in my hand. And so, we talk about those teachers. Well, I had a neighbor who had been teaching, she had taught 20 years before me. So she's been in the field 40 years. She got a computer at her home so she could figure out how to use the one at school. And so I went over multiple times, turning it on, getting onto the internet. Oh no, this brought up this. What do I do? How come I'm not connected to the internet? The first time they even had Vicky, it was Vicky, first time they had internet at their house. And it's just, to me, I mean, that was 15 years ago, so it's definitely a learning curve. So,
well, and it's funny too, because like, I'm fairly tech savvy. I'll admit, I don't,
mhm.
even I'm moving towards I'm an elder millennial, moving towards that age. And so, I don't keep up as much as, the generation below me. But I was so thrilled the other day. I found out that I could copy a message on my phone and then paste it on my MacBook. And I was so excited that I accidentally figured that out and I didn't even mean to. So, there's always stuff changing that
Mhm.
there's so much stuff going on. And so you have to be able to know how to seek it out. And
Right.
another part that I think is a good thing is we need to do a good job of like explicitly teaching that with our kids is
Mhm.
being okay with not being good at something right away and messing it up.
Absolutely. Being willing to put yourself out there and failing to
Mhm.
learn.
Yeah.
And watching a teacher do that to kids is just, wait, you don't know how to do this, but I know how to do that. And I think it's just, yeah, but I'm learning, right? We're all learners. We're always lifetime learners. And computers have changed that. I mean, definitely have changed that view. And, that's where there's definitely computers have to be taught in the schools.
Mhm.
We just got to be careful on how it's done. And I think that's great that we have classes that are looking at that. So,
Yeah. And I think we're still trying to actually I've been finding it a little maddening is I'll be reading an article and I'll be like, yes, they get it. They get that we need time to be able to play with these new technologies that you're rolling out. And that our PD should not be you just telling us what we're doing and showing me click by click. I need to
mhm.
play with it and mess it all up before I'm expected to do it in front of my class. Because yes, our kids
Yes.
feel like when we, you know, make mistakes and stuff and we can demonstrate learning. But also, if I'm trying to just navigate and I can't even navigate the system while my kids are watching, they're going to get bored. I'm going to lose them.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
being able to kind of play with it and stuff is so important. So I'm reading these articles and I'm like, yes, they get it. Like we're making progress. And then I look at the date that it's published and it was from 15, 20 years ago. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wait,
Yeah.
wait.
School systems, yeah, school systems are a little bit slow in embracing, and which is frustrating again, because like you said, we learn a program and it's obsolete. So it's that whole, and it's, if you think about, I'm just reflecting 29 years, my curriculum on what I have to teach in the classroom has not changed. Basic. So let's say, for an example, right, you still have, yes, it's changed, but you still have the same amount of stuff to teach. So let's say we have this much to teach. Okay. Well, now we've just put computers on that. And so now it's gone up to this. and now social skills, and it's come up to this. And then we keep adding more and more things, but we're not taking things away. And I think as an education as a whole needs to look at the expectations we're putting on teachers, especially nowadays. What is it we have to focus on? And unfortunately, right now, we've let a lot of things pile up on what we have to teach, that then some of the social skills got dropped and some of the social interactions got dropped, that now we're struggling, being like, wait a minute, we got to figure this out, because we have people who can't, my husband, who actually just retired too, your dad, like Dad was saying, he hires these people and they can't look you in the eye in a job interview. They can't communicate. Now they do phenomenal on text and emailing, but on the social interactions, they don't know how to. They don't know how to think critically. They don't know how to think out of the box. And we're talking 20s, people in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
So there was definitely a gap there of something we let slip.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting. I've said this before, like with parenting strategies and stuff. I'm like, I see all of these different parenting strategies and they're all very opinionated. Show me the adults that are results of these parenting techniques, because they all sound great right now, but if we drop something or change emphasis and everything, and we have like tons of psychology backing things and all that stuff, but we can definitely see that sometimes, unfortunately, we don't see the consequences until later down the line.
Later, right? Hindsight.
Yep. Hindsight's 50-50, right?
50-50.
In our family, 2020 everywhere else.
Yeah.
But well, I think this has been a great little chat, and that I think we covered a lot and solved all of education's problems.
Yep, me too. Just ask me.
Yep. So, well, thank you again for doing this. This has been great, and I'm so excited to be able to share this little chat with other people, and I hope they get as much out of it as I do when I talk with you. So,
my pleasure
for doing this, and I will let you get back to your fun retirement.
All right.
So, bye.
Bye.